Bollinger Bands, do you really know how to use it?
Welcome everyone to Traders of the World, our new interview show where we bring inspiring stories about the financial market and incredible guests. I am Matheus Massari and I am extremely excited to be here. With me, I have Flávio Lemos and Alan Soares.
Okay, Matt. I'm Professor Flávio Lemos, President of the Brazilian local chapter of the CMT Association, and also author of some investment books, as you know it. I have just completed 50 years old, half a century of life. I'm a Brazilian, a proud father of 2 boys, and we are speaking English because we want this show inspire new traders from all over the world. I hope you all like it. Please click on it and spread our word.
Hi, my name is Alan Soares and I'm very happy to share this time with you.
Great, I'm certain that we have an amazing conversation with our guests. Speaking out of our guests, today we have a father and daughter. You know them for 20 years, right, Flávio?
Yes, Matthew. He came first in 2006 for the Expo Trader Brazil conference in Rio de Janeiro with the whole family. By the way, they always travel together when John is going to speak. His daughter was just a kid at the time with wonderful pink cheeks. I'm very proud he was also my sponsor at the CMT Association.
Great, so let's dive in. He's a world-famous analyst, creator of the Bollinger Bands and founder of the Bollinger Capital Management. And she is the director of client relations at the Bollinger Capital Management and passionate about social entrepreneurship. Please welcome Zoe and John Bollinger.
Hello.
Hello. Well, thanks for having us. I am John Bollinger. This is my daughter, Zoe Bollinger, and together we are the investment team here at Bollinger Capital Management.
Thank you for having us, and we're really looking forward to the conversation.
Sorry that we're not there in São Paulo with you.
It's true.
No worries.
Thank you so much for you both being here. So let's start. John, a wonderful curiosity for our audience. You have told me in Washington at lunch. Could you tell us which job you had before being an analyst and how have you begun your investment career?
Well, my first job out of school was as a cameraman in the movie industry, a cinematographer. And I did that until I was about 30. During that period, my mother required some help with her retirement, and she knew that I was interested in the stock market and asked me if I could help her out. So I gave it a go, using the traditional tools, brokerage house research and fundamental analysis, following the news and all of that, which was an utter disaster. And then I discovered technical analysis. And as soon as I discovered technical analysis, I was able to start doing a good job.
Thank you very much. So it's your mother's fault.
It is my mother's fault, almost entirely.
John, you are a bookman, a very studious market analyst, and also you are a money manager, a publisher, and a father. Tell us about some of your latest research. What have you been doing most recently?
Well, some of the recent themes that we've been exploring here are alternative streams of returns. If you take a very long-term look at the U.S. stock market, the U.S. stock market's obviously our major focus. It produces a great set of returns over the decades. However, it's punctuated by these periods of real panic. 73, 74, that is 1973, 1974 is a perfect example. The average stock on the U.S. fell by 50%. Yet over time, that's the set of returns that the stock market delivers is in the 8, 9, 10% range, depending on what you use as a start date and what averages you use, such like that. So what we've been working on recently is how to incorporate rigorous technical analysis, market timing, using many of the indicators that you all know and love to ameliorate those periods in which we have very big drawdowns. We're not so much worried about the periods in which you have 5 or 10% drawdowns. That was the definition of a correction when I came into the market. But once we start to exceed a pullback of 5 to 10%, we want to be hedged. We want to be in some defensive position. So for the past year, year and a half, or 2 years, we have been working on a rigorous methodology to allow us to deliver a stream of stock market returns to our clients without the big drawdowns that the stock market occasionally delivers.
Nice. So, of course, I need to ask this for our audience. How should a trader use properly the Bollinger Bands? Could you give us some example?
Well, perhaps the thing that traders need to understand more than anything else to start with is that Bollinger Bands are a tool. They are not a trading system per se. They're a tool that defines high and low on a relative basis. By definition, when prices touch the upper band, prices are high. By definition, when prices touch the lower band, prices are low. And traders can take that information and assemble that into rigorous trading systems. For example, we can look to define W bottoms, where the market comes down and makes a low, bounces, and makes another low, often a new price low accompanied by a lot of panic, and then rallies again. By using Bollinger Bands, we can diagnose those patterns and help traders find entry points where the amount risked is relatively small in relation to the potential gain. And that's the real key to all of Bollinger Band trading. We want to risk a relatively small amount in pursuit of a larger gain. And the other side of that coin is we want to find trade setups where the odds of success are in our favor. So when you combine those two pieces, a good chance of success and a small amount risked in relation to a larger amount gained, you have a very viable trading approach.
John, multicollinearity is the occurrence of high intercorrelations among two or more independent variables. What could lead to misleading results in analysis? So, how could a trader avoid multicollinearity using technical analysis?
So this leads into one of my favorite stories. Many, many years ago, I was at an investment conference, and a fellow came up to me with a printout, a chart printout. And he had a printout of price and Bollinger Bands and such like that. And underneath it, he had like 9 indicators, all stacked up. And he looked and he said, so, we came down and we tagged the lower band and we had this divergence, and I have 9 pieces of confirmation. But the trade failed. How can that be? 9 pieces of confirmation. And so I sat with him for a while and I worked it out. Each of the indicators that he used was basically the same indicator. They were all various forms of momentum indicators. And so they all gave the same result. So instead, he thought that he had 9 independent indicators, but what he really had was the same indicator in 9 variations. You correctly identified the problem. It's called multicollinearity. It means they're all related. They're all linked together. So the bottom line is there was just one piece of confirmation and not 9 pieces of confirmation. So he had a false sense of confidence when he entered that trade. And of course, he entered that trade because of that sense of confidence with too much leverage and too big a position, and so on and so forth. So it was a real disaster for him, but it didn't need to be. what I like to suggest is that people use different kinds of indicators, like a momentum indicator, a trend indicator, a supply-demand indicator, maybe a volume indicator, something along those lines. Different, really different types of indicators. And one of the real problems that people have is they haven't studied the indicators. When I came into this business, we had to calculate all these indicators by hand. So I know how they work, and I know how they can hurt you, right? And that's really important. So I think if I had advice to give traders, what I'd say is really study the indicators, pick up the original articles in which they were described, and read them very carefully, and try to understand what they are. One of the great things to do is to use some synthetic data. Say idealized data where market comes down, turns on a dime, and heads north, and then maybe makes a complicated top and comes down, and that way, and then add the indicators to that and see how they behave in those environments, so that you can really understand what the message that they're telling you.
I have read George Lane's books about stochastics. Stochastics is one of the indicators that people totally misunderstood, because some guy in a program chart said you have to sell at 80 and buy at 20. That's it. There's a lot of different stuff between what he tells you on the book, and what people does it actually. They don't know how to use it. That's a problem. And a lot of moving average with MACD showing the same information at all.
So, Joe, going in the same direction as your last answer, how do you think new traders could be better prepared for this dynamic current market?
I like to say that you should read the classics of technical analysis. There's so much information there. Flavio just mentioned George Lane. There are many other great books that are out. Many of them have been translated into many secondary languages. So there's a tremendous amount of literature out there. Richard D. Wyckoff is one of my favorites. He was writing almost 100 years ago, but when you pick up his work and read it, it reads like contemporary analysis. I mean, he was so smart. He was so far up the case. Martin Pring's early books on technical analysis I think are really excellent general works on technical analysis, because he focuses on the basic concepts, the underlying ideas. The more you read, and I really think that you should focus on reading the classics. There's just so much information there, great information. Everybody thinks that the markets have changed and morphed and all that, but the bottom line is they really haven't. It's still buying and selling. It's still I want to sell you my shares, and you want to sell me your shares, and it's that conflict over time. Those human dynamics, they don't change, and that's what really lies at the core of technical analysis.
So I know that your family has accompanied you and in your presentation around the world. Even in Rio, you were all together. The future of a family business is only as promising as the competence and acumen of the next generation. What challenges do you face in passing your passion and knowledge on to the next generation, and what's your style to motivate Zoe?
Well, I think perhaps she can answer that a little bit, but I'll just hint that the thing that I found the most challenging in teaching Zoe was to figure out what to teach her. Right, I have this fantastic body of knowledge. I have very deep understanding of TA and its history, but not all of it is relevant and such like that. So just thinking through and making like a plan to transmit this knowledge was the biggest challenge for me. But I think Zoe should really answer for herself.
So please, Joe.
Go on.
Yeah. I think he undersells himself. He did a really exceptional job of the training. I think, it's a matter of also where it really came together was as it interwove with what was happening in the markets. I had perhaps the pleasure, perhaps the pain of joining the markets in sort of an interesting period for US markets. Like to joke, I really joined the business. I'd been trading before that, but I joined the business in 2019, just in time for a big end of year correction, which was followed by quite a large rally, and then COVID, and then quite a large rally, and then 2022 with inflation and deflation and all of that. So every year I've relearned that the market has something to teach you every year.
I planned all that, by the way.
He did. He put in a request. So any complaints about recent years, interesting markets can be sent to him. But
if I had tried to train her from like 1992 to 1998, that's 6 years where we never had more than a 10% correction and such like that, it would have been really hard. But we had really dynamic markets after she joined the company. So we were able to, I was able to tell her, what I was seeing, why I was making these decisions, how I was making these decisions, the tools that I was using. She was able to learn in a real-time laboratory. None of this paper trading or none of this theoretical stuff. It was a practical immersion. And I think that she's much the better for that.
Yeah, it was certainly good as we worked on trading systems. He talked about the idea of taking some synthetic data and using that to analyze how indicators respond. And so we do a bit of that, but his real mantra is don't paper trade it. You'll learn if it works if you actually use it. And so we built a couple of different trading systems together, and we had the benefit of really getting those tested in real time, quite variable markets, and seeing what worked in which environments, and what in fact might be a tweak or what you don't want to tweak because this is a situation and you just recognize the strengths and weaknesses of a different approach.
Yeah, when Zoe came into the company, she had a real strong interest in impact investing, social entrepreneurship, and such. And she wanted to put together an investment program, based around those ideas, and that was fine by me. But I looked at the history of responsible investing, for want of a better term, and it seemed that if you really wanted to be an ethical investor, you have the track record was dismal. That these people had yes, made ethical decisions, but at the same time they'd thrown away a tremendous amount of return. So I didn't want to do that. I was happy to get involved in ethical investing, impact investing, and such, but I wanted to do it with performance as well. So that was the first real project that we worked on together. I brought my knowledge of relative strength and portfolio construction and such like that, and she brought her knowledge of impact investing and social entrepreneurship. We married those ideas and came up with a terrific program. And that's the way I've always liked it. I've always called that sort of a welding together of these pieces. I've always called that rational analysis, where you take equal parts of fundamental analysis or equal parts of technical analysis. I like to say that you take the best out of each toolkit, out of the best ideas out of the fundamental toolkit, the best ideas out of the technical toolkit. you combine them. And I think that can produce a really superior results. And I think the results of our impact in investing program are a great demonstration of the potential of that.
Nice. And I think that's the beauty of a family business, right? You have someone to guide you through the way. Oh,
Yes.
nice.
Zoe, how many countries have you accompanied your family to John's presentations? How old were you on the first trip abroad to his presentation?
Flavio asked me this a little bit as we were prepping for today, and I was trying to think about the actual number. The truth is, I don't know. I have to make a list, but I was quite fortunate. They took me along quite a bit, starting from a very young age. The first trip was at 8 months. So still very much in being carried around to Singapore, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. I wish I could say I remembered it, but I do not.
But I remember it.
But it was the start of a really nice path, and I got to travel with him to many places, including Brazil, and listen to his presentations and kind of learn the ropes.
Yeah, we're a real family values sort of family. So the opportunity that we had to travel together over the years was, invaluable to us.
Yeah. So Zoe, tell us about your beginning as a trader. Up from the start, do you want to follow your father's work? Please don't lie to us. What did you study?
So I was quite stubborn, and I went with him on many trips, and I watched him work, and I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to do this. And largely that was partially because of how successful he was and how well known his work was. And I very much wanted to make my own way and make my own mark and not just start kind of coming up in his shadow. So I always swore up and down. People would ask me all through my childhood, oh, so you're going to follow in his footsteps? I was like, no, no, no. So I went to University for Economics and International Relations, and very much with the thought from all the travel that perhaps I would be a diplomat. And as I started taking all of the diplomacy courses and peace and conflict resolution courses, I came more and more to realize that if the economy wasn't working, none of the rest of it really worked. And slowly but surely went more and more in a business econ direction, and went out and worked for several years in a variety of different industries doing international business, trade, business development. And at the same time was starting to earn a bit of my own money, have my own retirement account that I needed to make investment decisions for. And I'd done a bit of trading with him when I was a kid, some programming, some different things. But as he's the first to say, it's different when it's your own money at stake. So as I started to have my own investment accounts, and I'd sit down with him and talk about what to do with my account and what he was looking at and why he was making these suggestions, I got more and more intrigued. And it came to a point where I wanted to leave a job that I was at, and was talking with him about, good next steps, what I might want to do. And he offered up, if you ever want to come try officially doing the investment thing and working with us, now is the good time to try it. And I decided to make the leap, and I'm quite happy I did. It's a fascinating industry. I enjoy it. Keeps you on your toes, always something to learn, and really interesting. So
I'd point out a little bit about this. I had a roughly 10-year career in another industry before I took up in investing full time, and Zoe did as well. She had quite a successful career in international business development. And I think that outside experience, that real life experience of the world is incredibly valuable. I think these guys and girls who come up through high school and go to college and then finish off with business school and launch out into these investment firms and such like that are missing an incredibly important part of real life experience, and that coming coming into this business a little later, after having, you know, again, real life experience, I think it is incredibly valuable.
Nice. So, Zoe, what do you do at the Bollinger Capital Management? Tell us about your job there.
I wear a couple of different hats. I think the most important part of my job is working with him on the investments. We're an investment management firm. We invest both for ourselves, but also for clients. And so, you know, what I do most of every day is work with John on portfolio management, a combination of looking at our current investments, ongoing analysis of the markets and the economy broadly, and also the development of new trading systems, you know, starting with our impact program. But we've worked on a number since, down to the piece that John mentioned at the beginning of the interview about a sort of dynamic approach to hedging and some volatility-based approaches to creating less correlated income streams are the two things we're working on now. And then I also do a lot of work with clients, working directly with our clients around some financial planning, some retirement planning, looking at sort of a more holistic picture of their investments and their life goals. And I enjoy that quite a bit as well. It's kind of a nice balance between the analytical sides of the markets and the human sides as well.
I think the physical piece of it could be interesting as well. We each have our own desks, but we also have a partner's desk where we can sit together. There are two separate computers and big monitors, so that you know, during certain portions of the day we're able to, you know, sit and do our own work and our own thoughts and such like that. But then we can come together and work on problems together as they come up. And we developed a regular sort of schedule for that, what we do on each day of the week and such like that. So just the physicality of it, I think, is an important piece as well.
Okay, Zoe, as a trader, do you look at fundamentals as account balance, macro scenario? What's your current view about the actual market that big techs are outperforming the small caps?
Yeah, so we do, despite being known for technical analysis, and that's a big piece of what we do, as John mentioned earlier, this idea of rational analysis, that there's value from all sorts of different data and looking at them together, is a big part of our practice. So we look not only at trading patterns, we'll use trading patterns often as confirmation of when to enter or exit a trade, but we'll also look at fundamentals, both in terms of characteristics of a company. Are their earnings stable, that kind of thing when we're considering an investment. We'll also, I think one of the most useful things for me that we do is we do a regular analysis of different sectors of the marketplace, different industry groups, and how they're performing comparatively to each other, which gives you a little bit of insight both into the market cycle, into trends, and into psychology as well. So we do a little bit of everything, with certainly a heavy emphasis on technicals. And as you mentioned earlier, it's a Federal Reserve announcement day, so I think you ignore some of these fundamental aspects at your own peril, because they do move the market in different ways.
So another aspect of this is Zoe's become very good at stock screening. She uses some of this, you know, sort of, you know, very sophisticated analytical software to run through the long list of stocks. We have, you know, many thousands of stocks here to look at in the U.S. market, and we are primarily stock investors. We use ETFs, funds to a small extent, but we're primarily stock investors. So she'll develop screens of potential candidates, and then we'll go through them, you know, looking for opportunities. The screening process itself is a combination of technicals and fundamentals, but then, you know, we lean more heavily on the technicals to decide which ones to buy and when to buy them and when to sell them.
What What is your personal style as a trader?
Couple of different things. I found John's not too much of a systems person. He has all of that investment history behind him, and he'll kind of look at a chart and be like, I feel this one. This is the right thing. Maybe in 30 years, I too will be there, but not just yet. So I really like having a little bit of structure to help inform my trading decisions. So I'll use a variety of things, most of them technical, different indicators. We'll use in his book, he teaches, he has a couple of Bollinger Band methods. I really started out there. There's a reversal method, a trend following method, and exploring some of those to help me determine entries and exits and which stocks I was interested in investing in. And I still like to have that. I like that process of building systems, testing systems. And then you don't necessarily execute every trade in the system, but as guidance on the investments that I might be choosing to make. I'm also not a very short-term trader. I prefer sort of day to week timeframes. I don't do a lot of hourly minute bars, kind of in and out of things multiple times in a day. I find that partially because we are a business during trading hours and I'm looking at client work as well as system work, I don't have the time to be sort of micromanaging trades in that way. And so looking for longer term day time frame type of trades work better for me. But I think, that's one of the really fun things with investing is in general, you can kind of make those decisions. You can pick the style that works for you. You can pick the time frame that works for you. And as long as it's something you're comfortable with, it'll probably work out pretty well for you.
Yeah. I'm actually a little bit more of a systematic trader than it appears. I may not actually run a lot of physical systems and take the signals from them, but I have them running in my head. So I'm looking for setups that I've learned over the years where the ideas that I talked about before, where we're going to risk a relatively small amount in pursuit of a larger gain, and where the odds of success are in my favor. So it's an interesting combination of systematic trading and intuitive trading, and I like that combination.
It works for you, huh? It has to work.
Yeah.
Which tools specifically do you look at? Could you give me some examples?
So of course I would be remiss if I didn't say Bollinger Bands and the accompanying %B in bandwidth. We use, and I personally use a couple of different things. We've been playing around as we build this hedging system with all sorts of different indicators, from looking at things like MACD, which you brought up earlier, looking at stochastics, and kind of trying to figure out a diversified set of tools that don't have that high correlation where everything's a volume indicator. So I've been playing with that quite a bit lately. I like those Bollinger Band methods that are in the book. I find they work really well for me. And it goes back to something he talks about a lot, that there are things based on first principles in the market, that even if market dynamics change, that you still have tools that are fundamentally based on whether it's psychology, fear and greed, supply and demand market dynamics that kind of work continuously in different ways across different environments. So I like all of that.
Do you have a personal trader routine? Do you have a plan? Do you follow a plan or something like this? I like a diary.
So I don't keep a diary. It's probably a good idea. I probably should. I do track my performance quite carefully. Maybe I do keep a diary. It's an Excel sheet, but that's like a diary. I do, because I find, we talk a lot about emotions in trading, and it's very easy to either remember a win too much or remember a loss too much and take kind of too much of a lesson from any single trade. So, for example, last year I did kind of a personal experiment in a swing trading method where I looked at 2-bar reversals at the upper or lower band where a stock comes down and breaks down out of the lower band and then immediately breaks back in, and using that as an entry point to potentially trade through to the upper band and exit there. And so I keep quite a careful chart of each entry, each exit, what the time frame was, percent gain and loss, so that you can run the statistics and see. It might feel good or feel bad, but actually have a sense of, is this system over time generating returns that are better than just a buy and hold? Looking at standard deviation, looking at some of those different trade metrics. So I find that to be really helpful. And also for me, kind of some of that systematic thing of having a plan of I'll use that impact system as an example. And we trade that both for ourselves and clients, but that's a rotational program that could rotate up to once a week. And so on Thursday, we reevaluate and we trade that. And that's the day that we look at and think about that system, along with kind of quarterly review of the stock list that's used. So I think having that regularity and that routine is really helpful to make sure that you're staying on top of things and not letting things run away from you.
Yeah, one of the first things I did after she came on board was put together, what had been sort of my routines beforehand, but I'd never actually written them down and such like that. So we have certain tasks that we do every day and such like that I find very, very helpful.
Zoe, although in Brazil there is a woman population majority, in Brazilian exchange there are only 23% woman accounts. What do you think about these inequalities?
Something quite similar in the US. I don't think it's quite 23%, but there is a real majority of men who engage in investing versus women, especially on the professional investment side. It's quite heavily geared towards men. I'll laugh at some of the conferences that we go to. You're seeing more and more women, though. It's not quite as
you are.
It's not quite as intense as it used to be in terms of the skew towards men, but it's a really important issue. I was looking at a report the other day just on kind of women in the economy, and it pointed out a couple of statistics, both in terms of women's lifetime, sort of estimated length of life, being traditionally at least 5 years longer than men in many cases, and that the average age for women to become widows is actually around, it's like 59 and a half in the US. And then they often live for many, many years further and have responsibility for their own finances from that point on at the very least. So I think a combination of, financial education for women, removing some of that traditional thought process that like men should be the one to take care of the finances. And it's not to say that it should be only the woman either, but that should be something that's collaborative, that in a relationship, both partners are aware of the family finances, aware of the investments, comfortable speaking to an investment advisor or making their own investments, whichever direction they prefer, I think is really important. And it's good for the economy also.
Yeah, we've come a long way. When back in the day, we go to an investment conference, it was all men. I mean, literally all, just a smattering of women. And now you go and it's much greater representation. It's not enough, and we haven't come far enough and fast enough. But we're on the right track. We're headed in the right direction.
So Zoe, what advice would you give to younger traders, especially for women?
I think there's maybe three key things. The first is just to have confidence in yourself. It's not a space that's not for you. it's very much for you. You have every right to be here, to take control of your finances, to try investing. So, believe in yourself and give it a try. The second piece is that there isn't a right way to trade. People will tell you, oh, you should day trade, or you should only buy and hold in the long term, or you should only trade looking at daily bars, or, you should use leverage, you shouldn't use leverage. There really isn't a correct way to do it. The correct way to do it for you is a way that's sustainable for you. So if you have time to check in on your investments once a week, that's the way you should be investing. If you're interested in technical analysis and in indicators, then make a study of that and use that to trade, because it's interesting and you'll stick with it. If you find technical analysis and active investment horrifying, think about something like dollar cost averaging. Take a small amount of money and invest it every week or every month or once a quarter. You'll buy high sometimes, you'll buy low sometimes, but in the end, you'll be invested and you'll see some benefits. So figure out what works for you, and don't let people tell you, your approach isn't the right way, because if you stick with it, it's the right way for you.
There's a fantastic body of literature on Zoe's last idea of considering dollar cost averaging. DCA, or dollar, came from the post-World War II era in America, where people tried to come up with formula plans for investing, and there are a number of books out there on formula plan investing. They're all written in the 50s and 60s. It's essentially the beginnings of quantitative investing, and they had a lot of great ideas. So, in addition to the technical analysis literature, there's this other literature from the 50s and 60s on formula plans that is chock full of great ideas for investors, and Zoe just touched on.
And I think the third thing, one of the first things that John said to me really when I properly joined the business, was that investing is a privilege, and you never do anything that risks not being able to come back and do it tomorrow. And especially in COVID, we saw a lot of interest in the US grow massively in individual investing in the stock market. And in many ways, that's an extremely positive thing. But there was also a culture that came up kind of with that of bet big, bet it all, like all or nothing. If I implode, so be it. And I think if there's one piece of advice from me to new investors, it's don't do that. When you pick an individual investment, make that trade size a size that you can afford if it goes down a little bit. Don't bet it all and use massive leverage and allow the risk that if one trade goes against you, it would prevent you from coming back and investing tomorrow.
What she said.
So please, where can our audience contact you, reach you, follow you at Twitter? Please do some advertising.
My Twitter handle is @BBANDS, short for Bollinger Bands. But I think most importantly, we have a little Bollinger Band portal, bollingerbands.com. You can visit that. If you want to see some Bollinger Band analytics in real time for stocks and such, you can go to bollingerbands.us. But yeah, our real business here is capital management. And our portal for our management business is bollingercapital.com.
Yep. We covered them.
Great. Everything's going to be on the description right down below.
Perfect.
Excellent.
And we come to an end of this amazing interview with John and Zoe Bollinger. We want to thank you all, our viewers, for joining us in this journey.
Next
We
time
also-
in Sao Paulo.
Well, I hope you three, if you read too, both come to São Paulo next year to our Expo Trader again, number 6, and we also We also want to say thank you to John, to Zoe, of course, to Reed. I know she's here. For sharing your wonderful stories and wonderful, remarkable achievements with us. We hope that your accomplishments and dedication inspire much other traders.
Thank you. It
Our
was,
best to all our Brazilian friends.
it was a pleasure to be there. And, we would love to see you in person, hopefully soon.
Nice. Thank you, everyone. We see you in the next interview.